This is going to be interesting. There's a lot which you're going to pick up on. There's 6 or 7 different sermons that could be chased here. I'm going to give you a little bit, and you guys can decide what you want to explore more of. I told my dad I was officiating a wedding last night in Orlando, and my parents were for the weekend. I told my dad I was as I was leaving that's where I was going. And he said, "Oh, did you hear about the couple who, after years and years of marriage, finally admitted to themselves and to one another that they were really struggling and they needed help? So they went to the therapist, and the therapist started with the wife, and he said, what's the problem?" She says, "Well, I'm really unhappy. We've been miserable for a while. We don't talk. There's no intimacy. There's no affection. It hardly even seems like we're friends." And the therapist stands up and he walks over and sort of, takes her by the hand and gives her this long, sort of empathic, compassionate embrace, and sort of, stands back from her and looks in her eyes very close and says, "You are valued. You're enough. You are loved." And he looks at the husband and he says, "Your wife needs this kind of affirmation at least 3 times a week. Can you commit to this?" And the husband says, "I think I can. For sure I can get her here on Mondays and Wednesdays, but I fish on Fridays." My dad told me that. I thought that was great. He's been married for like 40 years or something. And the thing that caught me is I love it because it plays on this idea that what the husband needs is something from outside of him and outside of the marriage. Not just the advice of the therapist, but the therapist himself. As if the arrival of the therapist signals some kind of rescue, when in fact what the marriage needs most is for the husband to arrive, and probably for the wife to arrive in their own marriage. Not something from outside, but for them actually just to be present where they are. Not someone else, not an outside arrival, but sort of an inside arrival. Not an answer or a belief, but a transformation, a way of formation. And I think that's what this passage is getting at. Just last week we said, when Jesus gets ready to die, he says, "I'm leaving, and the same Spirit that enabled me and empowered me will actually enable you and empower you, and you'll do even greater things than I've done." And so, rather than merely just being in his presence, he says, this presence, the same Spirit or life, will be present in you. And so that was the anointing that he was sort of talking about, present in all people. Not a singular person, not a singular Christ, but rather the manifestation of what some theologians call the cosmic Christ, or the universal Christ in all people, the same Spirit in everyone. And so when the letter speaks of him coming, we need to be very clear that it's not talking about the historical Jesus coming back, returning, nor about a singular Christ figure in a second coming event. This is all stuff theology has been created after the fact. That's not what's going on here. Instead, here, him is actually a personified, gendered reference to the Spirit. That's everything the passage before was talking about, was the Spirit, and the presence of the Spirit in all people. And so here it's going on, but it now is gendering this reference to the Spirit. And as much as I disagree with and would like to walk back both the personification and the gendering of the Spirit, the point here is that the arrival of the Spirit, the coming of the Spirit, is being revealed in us, that it's not a separate thing. So, and all the way back at the very beginning of this letter, I think the first week when we started, the opening, the first few verses, it says that a kind of life appeared. This life appeared. We said the translation of that is actually not a really good one. Appeared is not accurate. It should say was revealed. The life was revealed. The life didn't appear, because the life that they're talking about, eternal life, like the Spirit has always been and is and always will be. It didn't appear. It's already here. And this clarifies, though, that it's not that Jesus appeared at some point. Historically, that's not what the letter's getting on about. What it's talking about is that this life, what John and this community would call eternal life, this unconditional experience, that's what Jesus revealed. And is now being revealed in all people. And the Spirit continues now in all people that same work of revealing this kind of life, this quality of life that's already there. The specific language helps us out here, to kind of hone in on this a little bit. The word in Greek is phanerothe, which is a really fun one to say, phanerothe. The root word is phos, from which we get the English word phosphorescent. It has to do with light. And this community of mystics understood light not to be the binary opposite of darkness in a very dualistic view, but instead that light was what revealed. Light revealed things. It illuminated things. It illuminated life and reality and the way things are. So This refers to the idea that something is already there. Something's already there. Only we're not aware of it. And then the lights come on, and we go, oh, that was there all along. You know, if you're in a dark room and someone turns the light on, you see things that you didn't know were there. They didn't appear. They're already there. They were revealed. So the point is, Jesus didn't bring eternal life. Jesus didn't create the sacred spirit. It was already here. We said early on, what Jesus is getting credit for is that he pulled back the curtain. He revealed what had already always been there. And this is not new. This is all throughout the stories of the scriptures. Jacob wakes up from a dream one time and he goes, oh, God was here all along. I was just unaware of it, right? And a shepherd's out for a walk and there's a bush that's on fire and he hears a voice that says, you're standing on holy ground. And it's not that the ground changed, it's that his awareness changed. It's always been there. It was simply revealed. And so what seems to be happening here is the idea that as the Spirit is revealed, what this passage is talking about, the bigger picture is that this kind of life is revealed. Eternal life is revealed. So as the Spirit, the presence of God in each person is being illuminated, is coming to be seen and known, also at the same time, this life that Jesus revealed is also being experienced. So the Spirit that is already here is being revealed, and it is revealing the life that is already here. You start to get the sense that what we need is already here. It's all around us, and it's a matter of sort of tuning in. Which is very consistent with the passage from last week. You don't need anyone to teach you. You don't need any more religious supplements. You don't need any more instruction. You've got what you need. And we said the important distinction is that this is not a singular. It's not that you and you and you and you and you and you have what you need. It's that y'all have what you need. It's meant to be what you have and what you need is meant to be held in community. So Stacy and I went to Puerto Rico the summer before we got married on a service trip. It was amazing. One of the highlights of the trip. Is that all I heard? We got to go one night to Mosquito Bay, which as Floridians, especially in the year of Zika, sounds horrific, but it's actually just a really, really bad name for what I would say is a natural wonder. It's filled with bioluminescent plankton. And if we were inside, I had pictures. It was beautiful. The same root as Phanerothek, phos, to illuminate or reveal the beginning of phosphorescent plankton. It was insane. We got to jump off the top of, I think it was like at least one story, but maybe a two-story like pontoon boat into the water, and the cannonballs were like these explosions of shards of light. It was insane. And so then we would all like float there really still, and it would get dark, pitch black. And then we'd move and splash, and we could see each other. It was one of the neatest experiences I think I've ever had. I think the letter is saying, when the Spirit that already is there is revealed, what happens is it stirs up that kind of water. It activates illumination. It stirs up the light that is also already there, so that we can see more clearly, so that we can see reality, so that we can see one another, the life that's already around us. And sometimes we can't see it when we're floating in the dark. And the more we stir, the more we swim together, the brighter the world becomes, not just for me, but for all of us. It has sort of that residual effect. And the more clearly we can see one another, we can see our world. So I want to offer a bit of a tweak on that first line of the passage so that we get a better gender-neutral and Armageddon-neutral reading. I think it could be something like this. And now, dear children, continue in this spirit, so that as the Spirit is revealed in us, we may know God in our experience of life. And now, dear children, continue in the Spirit, so that as the Spirit is revealed in us, we may know God in our experience of life. Or maybe more simply, keep swimming in the light. Keep swimming in the light. You don't need anyone to teach you. The Spirit is being revealed in you. Just keep swimming in the light. I want to offer a couple more windows into some of the language, because in English, it doesn't jump off the page, and it's actually quite frustrating. But in the Greek, there are a few words that are really powerful words. When you read through, they pop. There's this phrase, confidence at his coming. It's actually a play on words in the Greek. It's parousia at his parousia. So if you could read Greek, you're like, oh, ha ha ha, those words sound the same, funny. Scholars agree there's actually really no good English equivalent of the phrase parousia. It gets translated confidence, but it's more robust than just confidence. It's deeper than confidence, it's more than belief, it's more than hope or certainty. The closest we could get is to say that it's sort of like an experiential confidence. And I used this example at Occupy Trilogy this week. We were talking about it. And the example has to do with belief, even though this word parousia is more than belief. You can think about it like this. There's public belief, and so the example would be like King Herod in the Christmas stories. He wants people to think that he wants to worship the baby Jesus, even though he doesn't. He wants to kill the child. But he wants to imbue this public confidence that he wants to go worship this Christ child, even though he doesn't. So that's sort of like public belief or public confidence. He wants people to believe it, even though it's probably not true. Private belief or confidence would be like Peter, who says, Jesus, I'll never betray you. Never. And even he believes it. Even privately, he's convinced that he won't betray Jesus. And so this is an inner confidence that even he believes, even though it doesn't end up being true. But then deeper than both of these, there's what we would call core belief or core confidence. And the easiest way to talk about this is to think about gravity. Right? Gravity. That sort of confidence. And to think about this, we really would just say, I've never been to a gravity worship service. I've never been to a gravity conference. Never gone and tried to evangelize people to particular views of gravity. I've never stayed home and done like a little devotional to reassure my opinions about gravity. I simply don't walk off cliffs. This is the sort of depth of confidence I think that he's trying to name. It's something that comes from experience, and it probably comes from being a kid and falling down a lot. Right? And having experiences of gravity where you know it as reality. There is no didactic need to convince you of gravity because it is the world that you live in. It's gravity. You don't have to think about it. It just is. And so when he talks about the confidence that we have at the coming of the Spirit, it's trying to name that level, that depth of confidence. So what is the experience then of the coming of the Spirit in which we can have that kind of confidence? This experience is called parousia, which interestingly is actually a political term that referred to the visit of a diplomatic official or a delegation or a king. And it was the practice where the people of the town would rush out, even when this delegation or king was far off, they would rush out and meet them and escort them back into their town or into their city. And so parousia was not a sit and twiddle your thumbs, because you know that eventually they'll get there. It was an engage, someone is arriving, in helping to bring about that arrival. It was an active waiting. It actually invited everyone to participate in the ushering in of the arrival. It wasn't like sit and wait. It was like, there's going to be an arrival, so now we have to do something about that. So here, maybe we could say, we have this core confidence in the coming of this Spirit because we are the ones who are experiencing ushering it in. We're the ones who are living this sort of ushering in, this arrival, this appearing, or revelation every day. We're not just believing that the Spirit isn't here, but it might appear. We're not just believing that publicly or privately. We're not passively praying that this happens. I think what he's saying is the confidence in the coming of the Spirit, the confidence comes from the practice. We are actively seeking this sacred Spirit that is already in us, which is being ushered in, which is coming, which is being revealed in us. And to me, this is the most powerful part of the image. Parousia means that no one ever arrives alone. Even the king. The king doesn't ever get to arrive alone. The king only ever arrived with the people to whom he was arriving. Isn't that fascinating? And so with the Spirit. The Spirit cannot arrive alone. We can't all be sitting here and then the Spirit can come from far off and come near. The Spirit cannot be revealed alone. The only way the Spirit can be revealed is actually in the people to whom the Spirit is being revealed. So there's this weird cycle thing going on, right? It's kind of trippy. Let's pause for a second. I couldn't let myself skip over this, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, so I'm going to skim. I want to just name the tension and the questions here, because the next line, I'm just going to do this real quick and then we'll move back to what we were talking about. The next line of this passage is, everyone who does what is right has been born of him, or born of the Spirit. So I just want to ask a few questions. What if they don't believe the right stuff? Born of the Spirit. What if they don't pray the right way? Born of the Spirit. What if they disagree on what is right? Everyone who does the right thing. Born of the Spirit. What if we disagree on how we understand what the Bible or the tradition even says is right? Born of the Spirit. What if they aren't Christian, spiritual, religious, or even aware that they are born of the Spirit? Born of the Spirit, still. What if they do the right thing, but they do it for the wrong reason? Born of the Spirit. Everyone, that's just what this says, right? We're not going to spend a lot of time on it. It says everyone who does what is right, and I'm not going to offer a metric for what that is, but everyone who does that, everyone has been born of this same Spirit. And we go, well, great. What the hell are we supposed to do with that? Maybe just keep swimming in the lake. I don't know. See what happens. It goes on, and this was... I'm most upset about this. Not that you can't see Mosquito Bay, but I got Ian to fill the entire screen with the word "see" with an exclamation point, like S-E-E, see. That's the next word in the following phrase. See. Like, see what great love the Father has lavished upon us. This is in what is called the aorist punctiliar imperative, which if you have to pick a tense, I highly recommend that you pick the aorist punctiliar imperative, or if you have to dress up as a grammatical tense for Halloween tomorrow, also recommend the aorist punctiliar imperative. This is, to just break it down a little, this is in the present tense. Punctiliar is not referring to punk rock, but rather to punctuation, hence the exclamation point. It's an excited sort of deal. And it's imperative, not interrogative. So it's not asking a question, it's not making a suggestion, it's saying, look. And it conveys the image that if the text could reach up from the page, it would grab you by the face and like point your face towards what it wants you to look at. Like, look at this. Look, see. How do we best understand the love of God? And I want here, it's important to remind ourselves that there is this controversy going on in this early church. And many scholars actually say that this section of the text is where like the most formidable attack is made, which I've read it so many times and I don't see it. But it's almost cooler if you think that this is where they're really going after the other group that they disagree with. How do we best understand the love of God? Like a parent and a child. It's like the most docile attack of all time. How do we understand the love of God? It's unconditional. Like a parent for a child. We're all God's children. We're all God's family. And then it goes, we are children of God, and what we will be has not yet been made known. Which reminds me, what did you want to be when you were growing up? Give me some highlights. You can shout out for other people if there were really good ones. A fire truck? Not a fireman. A fire truck. Bless you. Well, here, let's start here. Was there anyone, especially people who are sort of on the other side of a career, who like grew up like, I want to be that, and then I went to school for that, and then I did that, and if I could work for another 20 years, I would still want to be doing that, like saw that continuity all the way through? I know it happens. Anybody? Okay, Susan, cool. So there's, that's, I think probably, in terms of percentage, that's probably accurate. It's an anomaly. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. All right, what are some other highlights? What did you want to be? Journalist. A journalist, all right.
Veterinarian.
Marine biologist, what'd you say, Rob?
Veterinarian.
Veterinarian, all right.
So instead I just collect animals.
Okay, so right, just collect animals. Of those, well, I think I'm trying to think of, no, none of those worked out. You're not who you said you would be.
Archaeologist.
Archaeologist, okay, cool. What about what do you want to do? Right? If you look at sort of your future, anybody doing something now and they want to be something very different in 10 or 20 years? Katie, you don't want to be a student still, or maybe you do. I don't want to speak for you. Okay. But you also said you don't know. You're not sure. Okay. Anybody else want to be doing something different? Okay. Me and Andy and Katie. Awesome. Okay, right. So some of you are working careers and you're like, I don't want to go back and be a student. Yeah, that would be pretty sweet. How about the influence of your parents? This is really, I think, what I'm most interested in. The influence of your parents or your DNA. I shared, and I know I don't ever ask my father permission, but I also feel like I've earned it because I've lived with him for so long. I share Conrad stories from time to time, but I've got the insatiable curiosity mixed with sort of painful workaholism and like fidgety tendencies where everything seems like it's got the equal weight of importance, and so I'll just do it all and do it today. So that's kind of what I'm fighting against DNA-wise. My dad this weekend being up to help us with the kids, we had some different stuff going on. What are all the projects? He took our doorbell apart. It's not back together. There are wires hanging out of the wall. He did buy us a new one, and he's like, "You're gonna have to fix this." Awesome. Thank you for the help. There was something else he was gonna start, and he ended up starting it. Thank God.
The faucet.
Oh, he did. Okay, so he did complete a project. He came out of the bathroom with our faucet, and he's like, "This doesn't work. We need to fix it." So he was at Lowe's as much as he was at our house. But yeah, that's how he is. I mean, he's there to help, with the kids, but he's also going to do 300 other projects because they need to be done, and somebody's got to do it, and he's here right now, and damn it, he's going to do it. So what about you? Influence, DNA. What are you kind of working with? How have you seen that influence in your life? Are there any addicts that's a part of their family? Kind of asking you to out yourself. Yeah, that's addiction runs in our family. I grew up with my mom saying, and alcoholism killed my grandfather that I never met, and so that was the messaging that I got growing up. It's like, we have addicts in our family. Be aware. Don't be stupid. How about good things? What are some of the things you've inherited? Yeah. Go.
My parents took 6 years before they had me. They had me going through life, so I really felt wanted. And if I said I wanted to be a garbage man, they'd be happy, whatever, as long as I'm happy. So I find myself, when I see people, I see all kinds of potential in them and want to encourage them. And that's what I got.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, so that kind of affirmation, that focus and support. Yeah, Kate.
So my mom was like a really obsessive cleaner, and I would always make fun of her when we were growing up. And then I didn't realize it until my roommates were like total slobs that I am like the exact same way, like always like cleaning up.
Yeah.
That's something I realized.
What did you say, Andy? I keep when I open my mouth, I hear my.
Oh yeah, I open my mouth and my father comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up. My parents are educators. Like you can't ask a question in their house without getting like a point. And
Lecture time.
I have the good and bad of that. I love teaching and educating people, and that's very much in my DNA.
Yeah.
I also have to be reminded that sometimes swimming in the pool is just swimming and not a lesson.
Right. I'll tell you about chlorine. Yeah. Anybody else compelled to share? Yeah, Kenny.
I mean, we sort of talked about this earlier where I was like, I've recognized a lot of traits from both my mom and my dad in me, and not necessarily the best personality traits, but I can like sort of see them popping out. But they're not their traits, they're my traits. Like, it's stuff that's sort of coming together to form who I am.
Yeah.
So it's not so much about like, I'm becoming one of my parents, it's that I'm becoming myself, and that I'm the product of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Influence and DNA. That's a good segue. I was thinking about this week, not for myself, which I learned as we were going through the questions, but about June and Huck. Obviously, that's sort of what I'm thinking of. I had a really cute picture of them in the pumpkin patch. There would have been oohs and ahs, I know, but you can just see them when they come out. So right now, June is gravitating towards princess or dancer, and Huck seems keen on fireman or dinosaur or tractor. But we don't, and I was sort of thinking about this, we don't know what they will be. We don't know. But, and sort of what I'm wanting us to reflect on is that we know that they will be like us, like Stacy and I, at least in that they will be the product of our parenting and of our DNA. That will be reflected somehow in who they become. And as I was thinking about it, because the language here, this says we're all children of God. He says, look, this is who we are. This is the metaphor he chooses. And the mystics, over the courses of many, many centuries, have spoken of this as divine DNA. That's sort of like kind of one of the ways they think about it, this metaphor of familial identity or familial belonging. And we said last week, the way that Jesus chooses to describe how the Spirit works or what it feels like or what it does in people and in a community is that the Spirit teaches and it guides and it leads and it reminds and it corrects. Which I don't know, but that sounds to me like parenting. So sort of the two things that are jumping out is that somehow the revealing of this Spirit shows up through this kind of parental deal, that we inherit some of the DNA, that we inherit, that we become kind of the product of our influences. So we allow sort of the origami of divine DNA to unfold in our lives, and we learn to listen to that inner parental spirit as children of God. And I think the parental image is actually a really good one, because many of us, I think, spent our lives going, my parents don't know anything, and I'm never going to do what they do. And then we get to a point in our life where we look back and we're like, oh my God, they're so wise. You know, and we're like, oh, cool, I could have listened 20 years ago. That would have been great. And we said last week, Jesus says to his followers that they're going to do even greater things. And that's sort of the dream of any parent, right? Not that my kids will just do as well as I did, but that they'll do even better. We don't know what will be. But as the Spirit is revealed, as life is revealed, we are coming to know just a little bit more. And I do think it's sort of that day at a time kind of revelation. I don't think it's sort of the in-breaking sky cracks. You know, we have those moments of enlightenment, but I think the practice of that every day, tuning in to that inner voice, to the Spirit that's already in us, is more what this is talking about. I was going to show inside one of the new, I think it's called Share the Joy, but it's these great back and forths with Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama. And they just like laugh and cut up the whole time. They're brilliant. But this one's like 2 minutes long. They're talking about people as art. Right? They say people are perfect. They're masterpieces. We're just not done yet. We don't yet know what will be, but you are a masterpiece in the making. I was saying last week as we're sort of tearing down and cleaning up, I was talking to Rob and Freddie, and they're like, we have to do this again in a week. You know, what are we talking about? What are the songs going to be? We started talking about songwriting, and I was saying to them, they write songs. They both write songs. And if I were to sit down while they were in phase 1 of songwriting, the initial version, they're sort of roughing out lyrics, they're playing with some keys, they're doing some melody stuff, I have no idea what that song is going to be. I don't know. I don't know. And the next time we sit down together, it could have changed key, the melody could have evolved, it could change tempo, double time, cut time, it could shift from a love song to a breakup song, depending on how things develop. What's it going to be? I don't know. I don't know. But I know them. I know them, and I know their influences, and I trust their influences, and I can look at their past work and sort of see the progression of what they've created so far. So we're art. We don't know what we'll be, but we know that our influences will have an impact. We know that we can actually choose our practices. And I think maybe that's one of the simplest practices, is just whether or not we'll listen. We'll either learn to listen well, or we won't. We can lean in to certain influences. We can stir the water. We can swim in the light. We can go out and usher in the coming of the Spirit. We don't know what we will be, but sort of what we talk about every week in some sense here is that we know the process and that we are committed to the process. We can't really be committed to an end goal, and maybe I'm outing myself here. We don't have any idea what the goal is. I don't have an agenda. There is no vision for this church. Right? But for some reason, we keep showing up because we know the process. We trust each other. We trust the process. We're committed to this every day, trying to figure out how is it that we listen and become the product of our influences, become the product of sort of the divine DNA, the Spirit in us. Over the course of the hospice residency that I've been doing, we've talked a ton, and this is almost like, it tastes a little chalky in my mouth to have to say, because it's just been overdone so much, but it finally sort of made sense this week to me. The phrase is trust the process, which early on, I was like, that's just a bullshit answer for you don't know what else to tell me. Like, hey, what about this? What about just trust the process? It almost feels as bad as like, well, just trust God. It's gonna be fine. I'll pray for you. It's like, no, don't tell me that. I need to know something right now. Like, what's the outcome supposed to be of being with dying people? What am I supposed to be learning here? What am I supposed to get out of this? How will I know at the end of this 10-month residency? How will I know that it's worked? And Martha, the sweetest lady in the world, she's the leader of our CPE unit, she takes a big breath and goes, well, trust the process. I will strangle someone. That's my father. So it's not, to say trust the process is not this passive, ethereal, sort of ideological thing, you know? Just trust God, just pray about it. It's like, rather, we know, and this is back to that confidence, like experiential knowing, we know that these experiences will influence us. That the combination of these experiences will create a particular formation in a person. And so trust the process isn't just like sit back and don't be engaged in it. In fact, it means keep going to the bedside with dying people when you don't know what to say. Keep pushing yourself to ask hard questions. Instead of sort of bullshit with small talk, keep processing. And these essentially like group therapy sessions that you have with people in your cohort, keep facing your own hang-ups, keep facing your own insecurities, your problems you have with the end of life. And what sort of finally occurred to me this week, because I had an amazing visit with a new patient, you get as active as you can with the things you can. You usher in the Spirit, you swim in the light, you hold this in the embrace of the community, you commit to some practices that help you do that, and then beyond that, you surrender the outcome. You surrender the outcome, which is actually not a form of disengaging. It's one of the most difficult forms of deeply engaging. If you can be engaged and have the outcome surrendered, that's like a sweet spot. We don't yet know what we will be. This is hard for us. Not you, I'm sure, but people like me who have the slightest issue with control and certainty, or who have more than just a little bit of crippling obsession with the future. I love this quote from John Shore. I don't want to get into the whole background, but it's funny. The title of this article he wrote is Hell Real? What Are We, 6? Which I think is just such a great article title. So he says this, if, while wandering around the inside of an art museum, I come across a door that is solidly locked shut, what do I do? Well, if I'm emotionally immature, I might wrestle with the door's handle, or maybe fall to the floor and try and peer under the door. I might throw a tantrum, because I can't get into that locked room. I might squat beside the door, fold my arms, and determinedly try to imagine everything inside the room. There are all kinds of ways I might waste my time outside that door. But if I'm emotionally mature, I will simply assume that those in charge of the museum know what they're doing. And for whatever reason, they don't want people going in that room. And that would be enough for me. So I would turn away from that door, forget about the room, and go back out into the museum where wonderful works of art are waiting to enlighten and inspire me. We do not yet know what we will be. I feel like this could become, I don't want to push it too hard and like force it, but I was thinking this week, this could become like one of those phrases that shapes our community over the coming years and shapes our interaction with each other. I could use people in my life who, when I'm going to that place, when I'm getting obsessive, when I'm getting sort of hyperactive about that, who could simply say to me, that door is locked. That door is locked. And I think we all need people who can say that. We don't know. We don't know. That door is locked. But turn around. You know what's not locked? Wonder. Amazement. Everything else that is already going on all around you. Yeah, maybe that door is locked. And maybe tomorrow that door won't be locked anymore. But it is today. But look around you. There's so much that isn't behind that door. And you're missing that. Right? The Spirit isn't arriving behind a locked door. I promise you. As we come to know, we will be like Christ. Whatever that means. We don't know. We don't know. Amen.
On the question of DNA, I come from a family of storytellers. None of you would guess that, having spent 5 minutes with me. My great-great-grandparents were organic, locavores, made their own clothing, took care of themselves. They were hipsters, basically. They were what every hipster today wants to be. They just knew it as pioneer farmers in rural Florida. The stories that have been passed down through my family, one of them is that literally my great-great-grandparents lived so far out in the woods that the only way that they got news of the outside world or saw visitors was to go to the nearest road, which was still a wagon trail, and sit there sometimes for days on end waiting for someone to come by, and they would invite them to come stay at the house and feed them and let them stay for a couple of days just so that they saw someone other than each other and got news of the outside world. But when Ben was talking about ushering in the Spirit, ushering in that thing which is around us and connects with us, that's the image that I kind of had in my head. But I also wonder if they wondered or had any idea what would become of the place that they were, or the people that their children would become, and their grandchildren and great-grandchildren and so on. And the beautiful things that happen in the everyday for these people who had to trust the process. They had to know. The only way they knew they were going to eat was to put seeds in the ground and to do the work around it and then trust the process. The idea of knowing versus mystery very much shows up in the words of Jesus as he comes with his disciples as they are sitting and he shares that meal with them. When he says, "Do this in remembrance of me," they have no idea what he's saying at all. And they definitely have no idea of all the messed up theology that's going to go around it for thousands of years after that. But the word that kind of comes out of that, some of you have heard me say it before, this word anamnesis, to remember so clearly, the root in there is to remember so clearly that it becomes reality again now. That as we look at these things that we do know about ourselves and around ourselves, and we reach into this trying to usher in this thing, is to reach into the things that we know in such a poignant way that they become real again now to us. So as we come to the table, and all are welcome to come to the table, may we reach into this thing that we know as grace and love in a physical act of eating this thing of bread and wine, but may it be a spiritual thing that reminds us of going out to the road and sitting and waiting with anticipation for days to usher in that thing, that mystery around us, and may it become reality again for us now in this moment.
There's no wine. Yes. Pause. We don't know.